The words hit me like a blade. She's too blind to see it, Dad. We can take everything. She'll never stop us. It was my daughter's voice. My daughter. The girl I had raised, the child I had poured my soul into, standing in the next room whispering with my husband. I froze in the hallway, heart pounding in my ears. The laughter that followed was worse than the words. His deep, satisfied chuckle mixed with her soft, eager giggle, and it twisted my stomach into knots. They weren't just talking about me. They were plotting against me. Before I tell you how my world fell apart and how I rebuilt it piece by piece, I want to remind you, if you're into shocking betrayal, twisted family drama, and the sweetest revenge stories, make sure to subscribe, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Trust me, you're not ready for how this one ends. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. I wasn't supposed to be the victim in a story like this. I was supposed to be the woman who had it all. I built my fortune from scratch. Not inherited, not handed down, earned. I worked through college with 2 jobs, started a small marketing agency in my 20s, and by my late 30s, it had grown into a multi-million-dollar firm. Along the way, I married Daniel. He wasn't wealthy when I met him, but he was charming, attentive, and seemed to admire my drive. For years, I believed he was proud of me. Proud of what I had accomplished. Proud to stand by my side. And together, we raised a daughter, Emily. She was the light of my life. My reason for every late night and every risk I took. I wanted her to grow up never doubting her worth, never needing to rely on anyone else the way I once had. But somewhere along the way, that light dimmed. And I didn't see it happening. Daniel had always been good at playing the supportive husband. Smiling at galas, holding my hand at charity dinners, telling people he was proud of me. But behind closed doors, there were cracks. "You work too much," he'd say, a bite in his tone. "Do you really need all these accounts in your name? Maybe you should let me handle some of the money. You stress too much over it." I brushed it off as insecurity. I thought he'd come around, that he just needed to feel included. I gave him more say in the household finances, let him sit in on meetings with accountants. And all the while, Emily grew closer to him. At first, I was happy about it. What mother doesn't want her daughter to have a good relationship with her father? But then the closeness shifted. She began echoing his words, criticizing how much I worked, rolling her eyes when I reminded her to be responsible with money. "You care more about your business than family," she snapped once. She was only 17. It cut deep. I thought it was teenage rebellion. I didn't see the truth lurking underneath. The night I overheard them was the beginning of the end. I had come home early from a client dinner. As I slipped off my heels in the hallway, I heard voices in the study. At first, I smiled, Daniel and Emily talking together. But the smile faded quickly. "She won't notice until it's too late," Emily whispered. "Exactly," Daniel replied. "She trusts us. We'll move the account slowly. By the time she realizes, it'll all be ours." My blood ran cold. "Accounts? Ours?" Emily giggled. "She thinks I'm on her side. But I'm not stupid. I know where the real power is." Daniel chuckled. "That's my girl." The words twisted like a knife. My girl. She wasn't his girl, she was mine. My daughter. I stumbled back down the hallway before they could hear me, my heart shattering with each step. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying their voices over and over. The husband I trusted. The daughter I loved more than life itself. Together. Against me. I wanted to believe I'd misheard. That there was some other explanation. But deep down I knew. Daniel had never stopped resenting my success. And Emily, sweet, impressionable Emily, had been pulled into his orbit, blinded by his charm, seduced by his promises of shared power. The 2 people I should have trusted most were the ones plotting to destroy me. I kept quiet at first, testing the waters. Watching them. Looking for proof. And slowly, the pieces fell into place. Bank statements that didn't add up. Investments I hadn't authorized. Emily suddenly having expensive clothes, jewelry, gadgets I hadn't bought her. When I asked, she smiled sweetly. "Dad gave them to me. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. Because every new purchase was another reminder that my fortune, the empire I had built with my own blood and sweat, was slipping away. And the people stealing it weren't strangers. They were family. That was the night my role in this story changed. I wasn't just a wife. I wasn't just a mother. I was their mark. Their target. And I swore to myself I wouldn't let them win. They thought I was blind. They thought I was weak. But they were about to learn exactly who they were dealing with. If betrayal is a fire, it never starts as an inferno. It begins as a spark, small and easy to miss. Looking back, the sparks had been flickering for years. I just refused to see them. Daniel wasn't always resentful. When we first married, he seemed proud of me. He bragged to his friends about my business, about how lucky he was to have a wife who was successful. But over time, the pride turned sour. "You work too much," he would mutter at dinner, stabbing his fork into his plate. "You're never here. Emily needs you." Or the one that cut deepest. "It must be nice being the boss of everything. Maybe you should try being a wife for once." I'd laugh it off, tell him he was exaggerating. I thought it was insecurity. I thought if I gave him more involvement, more control, it would ease his feelings. That was my mistake. It started small. I let him handle small household accounts, then joint investments. He insisted it was to take the pressure off me. I wanted peace, so I agreed. "See," he'd say, smiling as he slid a document across the table. "I'm pulling my weight." At the time, it felt like partnership. In reality, it was positioning. He was planting his flag in places I wouldn't notice until it was too late. Emily, meanwhile, was growing up. And with adolescence came distance. At first, it was normal teen behavior, slamming doors, rolling her eyes, prioritizing friends over family. But slowly, her rebellion turned sharper. "You're never around," she snapped one evening after I missed a school play because of a client meeting. "You care more about your business than me." The words pierced my chest. I had been building everything for her future, her security. But she didn't see it that way. Daniel jumped in quickly. "Don't talk to your mother like that," he said firmly. But later that night, I overheard him in her room, his voice low and soothing. "She's always been like that," he whispered. "She thinks money fixes everything. But don't worry, Em. You've got me." I should have confronted him then. But I didn't. I wanted to believe he was just comforting her. I wanted to believe he wasn't sowing division between us. But deep down, a seed had been planted. Over the next few months, the distance between Emily and me grew. She started taking Daniel's side in arguments. When I asked her to help around the house, she'd shrug. "Why? Dad doesn't care." When I reminded her about grades, she'd roll her eyes. "Dad says school isn't everything." And the worst part? Daniel didn't correct her. He encouraged it. Subtly, quietly, but consistently. One night, I found Emily in the kitchen scrolling through her phone, a brand new bracelet glittering on her wrist. "Where did you get that?" I asked. She smirked. "Dad bought it for me. He said I deserve nice things since you're always too busy." It was like being slapped. Not just because of the gift, but because of the words. Words Daniel had clearly fed her. I began to notice the way they exchanged glances at dinner, silent looks I wasn't included in. Private jokes. Shared smirks. I told myself I was imagining it. That I was just being paranoid. But then came the bank statements. At first, it was just small discrepancies, withdrawals I didn't remember authorizing, minor transfers between accounts. Nothing huge. But over time, the amounts grew. Thousands here, tens of thousands there. When I questioned Daniel, he waved it off. "Just shifting investments. Don't worry, you'll thank me when they grow." Emily echoed him, rolling her eyes. "Mom, you stress over everything. Dad knows what he's doing." Her words stung more than the missing money. Not because she defended him, but because she no longer defended me. The cracks widened further one Sunday morning. I was in my office reviewing paperwork when I overheard them in the living room. "She'll never see it coming," Daniel said. Emily laughed softly. "She's so focused on her clients, she doesn't even notice what's happening right under her nose." My stomach churned. "Patience, sweetheart," Daniel murmured. "We'll get there. And when we do, It'll all be ours. All ours. I remember gripping the edge of my desk so tightly my knuckles turned white. My own daughter, my flesh and blood, was giggling with her father about taking what I had built. And worst of all, she wasn't being manipulated. She was participating. That night, I confronted Emily. "Have you been talking to your father about our finances?" I asked carefully. Her eyes widened, then narrowed into a glare. "Why do you always make it about money? Can't you just trust us?" "Trust?" I echoed. "I'm your mother. I have the right to know what's happening." Her lip curled. "You don't trust anyone but yourself. No wonder Dad says you're impossible." The words sliced deep. Not because of what she said, but because I knew exactly where she had heard it. I went to Daniel after that, desperate for answers. "She's turning against me," I said. "You're feeding her these ideas." He looked at me with feigned innocence. "What are you talking about?" "She's a teenager. Of course she's rebellious. Don't blame me for your relationship with her." But his eyes betrayed him. There was satisfaction there, smug and quiet, like he was enjoying the wedge he had driven between us. That night, lying awake in the dark, I realized the truth. This wasn't just a father-daughter bond. This was an alliance. And I was their enemy. The fortune I had built, the home, the business, the legacy, wasn't just mine anymore. It had become the prize in a game I never knew I was playing. And my own daughter had chosen the other side. There are moments in life when you can no longer lie to yourself. I had told myself Daniel was insecure, Emily was just rebellious, and the tension in the house was normal family strain. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. It was late one Thursday night when I heard them again. I had been working in my office, drowning in client files, when faint voices drifted from the study. The door was closed, but the glow of the lamp bled into the hallway. I shouldn't have listened. I knew that. But something in me, some instinct I had been ignoring for far too long, pulled me closer. "Are you sure she won't notice?" Emily whispered. Daniel's reply was calm, confident. "She never checks twice. That's her weakness. She trusts the first number she sees. By the time she realizes what's missing, it'll already be moved." Emily giggled. "You're smart, Dad." I pressed a hand to my chest to keep from gasping. My daughter. My little girl who used to crawl into bed with me after nightmares, now whispering conspiracies with the man who was supposed to be my partner. The days after that conversation were torture. I couldn't look at them without hearing those words in my head. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. So I started watching. I checked my accounts carefully. At first, everything seemed fine. But then I noticed small withdrawals from my personal savings, always rounded numbers, always late at night. They were small enough to be overlooked, but frequent enough to raise alarms. When I asked Daniel, he shrugged. "Just move some things around. Consolidating. Don't stress." Emily chimed in with a mocking smile. "Yeah, Mom, don't stress. Dad knows what he's doing." The smugness in her tone made me want to scream. One afternoon, I returned home early. The house was quiet, but Daniel's laptop sat open on the dining table. Normally, he was careful, passwords, locked screens, always guarded. But this time, he had slipped. The screen displayed a spreadsheet of accounts. My accounts. Several had been partially drained, the funds rerouted into shell accounts I didn't recognize. At the top, a line read, "Projected consolidation, full transfer pending." My hands shook as I scrolled. The numbers weren't small anymore. They were 6 figures. I snapped the laptop shut before he could walk in and see me. But the truth was carved into my mind. He wasn't just nibbling at the edges. He was gutting me, one calculated move at a time. That night, I tried to reach out to Emily again. I said softly, standing in her doorway. She was sprawled on her bed, scrolling through her phone. "We need to talk." She didn't look up. "About what?" "About money. About your father." Her eyes flicked to mine, cold and sharp. "What about him?" I swallowed hard. "I think he's been moving funds without telling me. And I think you know about it." She sat up then, her face twisting into a smirk I didn't recognize. "So what if I do?" My breath caught. "Emily." "He's right, you know," she said, cutting me off. You act like you built everything for us, but it's always been about you. Your business. Your success. Your rules. Dad says it's time someone else took control. Dad says. The phrase stung worse than the words themselves. My daughter wasn't just siding with him, she was parroting him. Emily, I built this for you, I whispered. For your future. She rolled her eyes. No, Mom. You built it for yourself. And honestly, you don't deserve it anymore. I staggered back like she had slapped me. The venom in her voice didn't belong to the girl I raised. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. A week later, I received a call from my accountant. His voice was tense. Did you authorize a secondary signature on your investment accounts? My stomach dropped. No. Why? There's paperwork here with Daniel's signature. And Emily's. Emily's? Yes. A joint authorization. It gives them access equal to yours. I nearly dropped the phone. My daughter wasn't just complicit, she was a partner. She had signed her name to my downfall. That night, I confronted Daniel. You forged her onto my accounts, I accused. He looked up from his drink, unbothered. Not forged. She signed willingly. My chest tightened. She's 17. She doesn't even understand what she's signing. He smirked. Oh, she understands perfectly. She wants what's rightfully hers. What's ours? Mine, I snapped. I built this. Not you. Not her. Me. His smile widened, cold and smug. Then maybe you should have guarded it better. I turned to Emily, desperate, searching her face for some trace of the girl I had raised. Emily, please, I begged. You're my daughter. How could you do this? She crossed her arms, her expression icy. You're not a victim, Mom. You've been controlling everything for too long. It's time you learned what it feels like to lose. The words stole my breath. My daughter wasn't just siding with him. She was enjoying it. That night, I lay awake, the weight of betrayal crushing me. My husband and my daughter, my family, had become my enemies. But somewhere in the numbness, a spark ignited. They thought I was weak. They thought I was blind. They thought I would roll over and let them take everything. But they had forgotten who I was. I was the woman who had built an empire from nothing. I was the woman who had fought every battle alone and won. And if they wanted war, then war was exactly what they would get. I had spent days trying to hold myself together. Days of pretending I didn't know what they were doing, of pretending the accounts weren't being drained, of pretending Emily wasn't slipping further out of my reach. But the lie was eating me alive. So I decided to end the charade. It was a Friday night. We were sitting in the living room, Daniel with a drink in hand, Emily scrolling on her phone, me pretending to read a magazine. The silence was thick, heavy, like the house itself knew a storm was coming. I set the magazine down and looked directly at them. I know what you're doing, I said quietly. Daniel's eyes flicked to mine, calm, unreadable. Emily froze, then rolled her eyes. Here we go. You've been moving money. Transferring accounts. Putting Emily's name where it doesn't belong, I continued, my voice trembling with anger. You're stealing from me. Daniel leaned back, swirling his drink with maddening calm. Stealing? That's a strong word. It's the truth. He smirked. Or maybe you're just paranoid. Maybe you've been working too hard, and now you're seeing ghosts in numbers. I clenched my fists. Don't gaslight me, Daniel. I saw the transfers. I saw the authorization forms. Emily finally looked up, her glare sharp. God, Mom, do you even hear yourself? You sound insane. Dad's just helping manage things because you can't do everything yourself. My chest tightened. Helping? He's gutting what I built. And you, I turned to her, my voice breaking. You signed your name to it. How could you do that to me? Her lip curled. Because you don't trust anyone. Not me, not Dad, not anyone. You hoard everything like it's yours alone. It is mine. I snapped. I built it. Every cent, every contract, every account. I earned it. Daniel chuckled softly, like my rage amused him. See? There it is. Mine, mine, mine. That's all you've ever cared about. The words felt like knives. But what hurt more was the look in Emily's eyes. Cold. Detached. Emily, I whispered, trying one last time. I did all of this for you. For your future. Why can't you see that? She stood up, crossing her arms. No, Mom. You did it for yourself. You cared about the business more than me. More than Dad. And now you're shocked we don't worship you for it. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I gave you everything. And you're throwing it away for him. Her voice was steady, chilling. I trust him more than I'll ever trust you. Daniel smiled, victorious. He rose to his feet, walking toward me with slow, measured steps. You always thought you were the smartest one in the room, he said, his voice low. But here's the truth, you were predictable. Easy. Too focused on your empire to notice the cracks. You left the door wide open, and we walked right through it. I swallowed hard, rage boiling beneath my skin. You think you've won? He smirked. Haven't we? In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and raw, but beneath it was steel. They thought they had broken me, that I was defeated. But they had underestimated me. I took a deep breath, forcing calm into my voice. Enjoy it while you can. Because everything you've done, it will come back to you. Both of you. Daniel laughed, dismissive. Emily shook her head, rolling her eyes again. But I saw it, a flicker of uncertainty in Daniel's gaze, a hesitation he tried to mask. He knew me well enough to know I wasn't bluffing. That night, after they had gone to bed, I sat alone in the dark kitchen. My hands trembled as I sipped cold coffee, but my mind was sharper than it had been in months. They thought they had me cornered. They thought their gaslighting would make me question my sanity, but all it had done was fuel my resolve. If they wanted a war, they'd get one. I didn't care that it was my husband. I didn't care that it was my daughter. They had declared me their enemy. And I was done playing nice. The next morning, Emily didn't come down for breakfast. Daniel was gone before I woke, leaving only a note on the counter. Meeting. Don't wait up. I sat at the table alone, staring at the empty chairs, and I felt the strangest mix of grief and clarity. The family I thought I had no longer existed. My husband was a stranger. My daughter was my betrayer. But I still had one thing left. Myself. And they would soon learn that was more than enough. The downfall didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like watching cracks spread across glass. At first, I thought I could patch them, hold everything together. But one by one, the cracks shattered into something beyond repair. It started with my accounts. I woke one morning to find my personal savings, nearly $250,000, emptied. The bank told me the transfer had been authorized by a secondary signatory. Emily. I hung up the phone in disbelief, my hands shaking. She wasn't just dabbling at the edges anymore. She was bleeding me dry, with Daniel guiding her hand every step of the way. Next came the business. My company, my pride, my blood and sweat. I discovered Daniel had been quietly persuading a few key clients to transition their contracts to a new firm. A firm Emily's name was attached to. When I confronted one of my clients, he shifted uncomfortably. Daniel told us you were stepping back, he said. He said you wanted Emily to start learning the ropes, take over. My stomach dropped. That's a lie. But the damage was done. One by one, accounts I had built over decades began slipping away, siphoned off into the hands of my own husband and daughter. And then came the house. It was a Saturday morning when I came downstairs to find Daniel sitting at the dining table with a stack of papers. Emily was beside him, smug as ever. What's this? I asked, my voice tight. He slid the papers toward me. You're being bought out, he said simply. I blinked. Bought out? Of my own home. It's not just yours, Emily chimed in. It's family property. Dad and I agreed it's best if you move on. Move on? My voice cracked. Daniel leaned back, his tone calm, almost patronizing. We'll make it easy for you. You can take a smaller property, something manageable. This place is too much for you now. The audacity made my blood boil. This is my house. I paid for it. Every brick, every inch of it, mine. Daniel's smirk widened. Not anymore. You should have read the contracts more carefully. I felt the walls closing in. They weren't just taking my money or my business. They were erasing me from my own life. The betrayal cut deepest when I looked at Emily. She didn't look conflicted, or guilty, or even hesitant. She looked satisfied. My daughter. My little girl who once clutched my hand on her first day of school, who once cried when I missed bedtime. Now she was looking at me like I was the obstacle standing between her and her prize. I tried reaching out to family. My sister, my closest confidant, was the first person I called. "You won't believe what they've done," I whispered, voice breaking. "They're taking everything. Even Emily, she's against me." But my sister sighed, her tone cautious. "Are you sure? Daniel says you've been under a lot of stress. Emily told me you're unstable." The words stabbed deeper than I could have imagined. They were already spreading their poison beyond my walls, painting me as paranoid, unwell, unfit. Even my own family doubted me. Within weeks, my world collapsed. The house was no longer mine. My accounts were gutted. My business was bleeding clients. One night, I stood in the middle of my empty office, boxes stacked around me, the sound of silence echoing in a space that had once buzzed with life. I had built this empire from nothing. And in a matter of months, my husband and daughter had reduced it to rubble. I moved into a small rental apartment on the edge of town. It was all I could afford after the buyout, all that was left untouched by their scheme. The first night, I sat on the floor with nothing but a suitcase and a cheap lamp, tears streaming down my face. I had lost everything. My marriage.my, daughter.my, fortune.my, home. But as the hours ticked by, the tears dried. And something colder settled in their place. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought they had left me powerless, beaten, forgotten. But they didn't know me. I hadn't built my empire by luck. I hadn't climbed from nothing by being naive. I had done it by being smarter, faster, and more relentless than everyone who doubted me. And if they thought betrayal would break me, they were wrong. Because betrayal doesn't end stories. It writes new ones. That night, I opened my laptop. My bank accounts were nearly empty, but my mind was buzzing with plans. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. They would twist it, gaslight me, turn everyone against me. No, my revenge had to be quiet. Calculated. Hidden in the shadows until it was too late for them to undo it. Daniel had always underestimated me. Emily thought she knew me. But neither of them had any idea what I was capable of when cornered. And this time, I wasn't building for them. I was building against them. The apartment was small, 2 rooms, thin walls, a leaky faucet in the kitchen. The kind of place I never thought I'd see again after clawing my way out of poverty years ago. Now it felt like a punishment, a cruel reminder of everything I had lost. At night, I'd sit on the sagging couch, staring at the peeling paint, replaying every moment. Daniel's smug smile. Emily's cold eyes. The laughter I overheard as they plotted to erase me. But the silence afterward was worse. It wasn't just the money. It was the isolation. Friends stopped calling. Business partners I had once considered allies suddenly distanced themselves. Word spread quickly. Daniel made sure of it. He painted me as unstable, burned out, incapable of handling the empire I had built. She just wasn't the same anymore, I heard one former colleague say. Daniel had to step in. It's for the best. Emily, my own daughter, added her voice to the narrative. Mom was obsessed with control, she told relatives. She never let anyone else breathe. Maybe now she'll finally learn. Her words reached me like poisoned arrows. Every time, it felt like dying a little more. The cruelest cut came when my sister stopped answering my calls. I left message after message, begging her to believe me. Finally, she sent a text. I can't get in the middle of this. Emily is family too. Please don't drag me into your fights. My chest ached as I read it. My daughter's lies had spread so far, even blood turned its back on me. There were nights I nearly gave up. Nights when I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the floor, wondering if it was even worth fighting anymore. Everything I had worked for gone. The people I had loved most turned against me. And worst of all, the gnawing question, had I failed as a mother? Had my ambition blinded me so much that I pushed Emily straight into Daniel's arms? Had I neglected her so badly that betrayal felt easier than love? The guilt twisted inside me, worse than the loss itself. But one night, something shifted. I was going through old boxes, trying to find comfort in pieces of my past. In one folder, I found the earliest documents from my company, the incorporation papers, the first contracts, the business plans scribbled in my own handwriting. I remembered the nights I stayed up until dawn writing proposals, the humiliating rejections, the sacrifices, the relentless climb. And suddenly, the tears dried. Because it hit me, I had been here before. Broke. Alone. With no one believing in me. And I had risen. I could do it again. The thought ignited something deep inside me. A fire I thought had been extinguished. Daniel had stolen my money. Emily had betrayed me. But they hadn't destroyed me. They had freed me. Freed me from illusions. From pretending we were a family. From holding back for the sake of peace. For the first time, I saw them clearly not as loved ones, but as enemies. And enemies could be beaten. The next morning, I showered, dressed sharply, and walked into the city with my head high. I met with an old colleague, someone I knew Daniel had pushed away when he was consolidating control. "Why should I trust you?" he asked coldly. I looked him straight in the eye. "Because I'm not finished. And when I rise again, do you really want to be standing with Daniel or with me?" He hesitated, then slowly nodded. A seed planted. That afternoon, I called Mr. Hughes, a lawyer who had once represented my firm. He was wary, but after I explained everything, he agreed to meet. "Do you have proof?" he asked. "Not yet," I admitted. "But I will. And when I do, I'll burn them both down." He studied me for a long moment, then leaned back. "Then let's get to work." Walking home that night, I felt lighter than I had in months. The city lights blurred around me, and for the first time since my fall, I smiled. Daniel and Emily thought they had written me out of the story. But I was only in the middle of it. Back in my apartment, I stood at the window, looking out at the city I had once conquered. My reflection stared back at me, tired, bruised, but unbroken. "They think I'm gone," I whispered to myself. "But I'm still here. And I'm coming for everything they stole." For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Because now I had something stronger than grief. I had a plan. They thought they'd seen the last of me, an emptied bank account, a vacant office, a rental apartment, and a rumor I was unstable. They'd congratulated themselves for being clever. They were smug, careless, and that would be their mistake. Plan doesn't mean panic. Plan means patience. It means assembling the right people and the right paper trail, and letting the truth become inevitable. First thing I did was inventory what I actually had left. It wasn't much, a handful of personal contacts who hadn't fully converted to Daniel's camp, a purse with a few $100s, my laptop, and the brain that had gotten me from a dingy studio flat to owning half a block of office buildings. That brain had invoices, contracts, and a muscle memory for where to find things. I started small and precise. I called Mr. Hughes back and met him in a coffee shop downtown, no fancy law firm office, nothing that would attract attention. He'd been blunt in our first meeting. "You need evidence that ties them to specific acts of fraud. Emotional stories don't win in court." He was right. So the new job was purely forensic. Find the money, show the transfers, prove intent. No drama. Just numbers and signatures. Next, I reached out to someone I knew Daniel had dismissed when he started taking over the business, Marina, a former operations manager who'd been loyal to me when clients still quoted my name with respect. She answered my message with a single emoji and a time, Thursday, 7 p.m. at a diner near her apartment. When I arrived, she slid a file across the table without a word. In it were printouts, client emails, odd invoices, a draft proposal with a new LLC name penciled in, an LLC I'd never heard of, but which was now showing up in payment chains. "I kept records," she said quietly. "I didn't want to get into trouble, but when you disappeared, I promised myself I'd help if you asked." Her eyes were wet, remorse and loyalty mixing. She'd been one of the few who saw me at my worst and still didn't turn away. She knew how Daniel operated. Slow erosion, plausible lies, plausible denials. Her file was a lifeline. It gave Mr. Hughes somewhere to start. He had the legal mind. Marina had the internal knowledge. I needed one more piece: financial expertise. Enter Ravi, an accountant who used to audit our books and whom I'd once fired for a petty disagreement. Reputation mattered to him, and he'd resented Daniel for dragging my name into rumors. He met me in a park under pretense of jogging. He wasn't jogging. He brought a laptop and a quiet fury. "Look," he said, opening a spreadsheet that made my head hurt at first sight. They spread transfers across shell companies, backdated invoices, and rerouted payments through vendors who never actually completed work. It's sloppy if you're clever, but it's perfect for tracing if you know where to look. He taught me the language of bank forensics: how to spot a layered transfer, how to identify a nominee account, how to read the tiny memo fields that people forget to change when they think they're being smart. Each night he stayed late at his office, downloading statements, redlining transactions. He would send a secure email at midnight: "Look at this." And I did. I learned quickly. Evidence is addictive. Once you see patterns, you can't unsee them. With Mr. Hughes, Marina, and Ravi, I had the skeleton. What I needed next was a way to turn skeleton into motion, an operation that would coax Daniel and Emily into making moves they couldn't hide. They were arrogant. They loved quick wins and public displays. I would give them one: a fake opportunity that looked irresistible, carefully staged so it would require signatures, approvals, and payments that would show up in the exact trails Ravi was tracing. We created a fictional partner, Cressmont Holdings. Mr. Hughes drafted plausible emails and an introductory deck. Marina made up a contact person with a traceable LinkedIn profile, one that didn't exist, but looked real on the surface. The idea was to let Daniel believe he could score big by transferring some contracts and payments into Cressmont's escrow account, which we controlled. We'd let him do it, document every step, and then reveal the chain. It was a careful dance because I couldn't be obvious. I kept my public face fragile, soft-spoken, apologetic when neighbors came by. I let Emily bump my confidence with an eye roll and a "you'll see, Mom." She saw me as broken. I let her. That was the cover the plan required. But the emotional work was the hardest. Waking alone at 2 a.m., I'd listen to my daughter's voice on a recording from happier days and feel something like grief that went cold fast. The personal betrayal welted deeper than any bank transfer could show. Sometimes the rage wanted to scream. I pressed my lips together until the taste of blood was metallic in my mouth and thought of signatures instead. This was not about revenge for revenge's sake. It was reclaiming what I'd earned and protecting the legacy I'd built for my child, even if she'd traded that legacy for a better life with her father. Practical steps mattered. A secure external drive, encrypted backups, burner accounts under third-party names to funnel information to journalists if necessary, and a small cache of cash to pay for private investigators and discreet services. Mr. Hughes arranged for a PI to quietly track Daniel's meetings and record conversations where legal. Ravi subpoenaed vendor records and cross-referenced transaction timestamps against the firm's CRM activity. Clients couldn't be moved without leaving a trail. We also set a contingency protocol. If Daniel tried to accelerate his transfers or liquidate assets, Mr. Hughes would use emergency injunctions. If Emily did anything rash, post online about me, or escalate a smear campaign, we had documented inconsistencies ready to expose her complicity. I learned to sleep with one eye open and a quiet, methodical hope. Weeks passed and the plan tightened. Daniel, proud of his recent power moves, started to boast at the country club, bragging about new ventures and how he'd taught Emily the ropes. Pride makes people careless. He took meetings with strangers who needed signatures. He signed forms that carried his authority. He didn't notice that the names of companies he was praising were the same names Ravi had circled red on his spreadsheets. One evening, I sat at my tiny kitchen table with Marina and watched a video the PI had captured Daniel laughing as he signed a paper to transfer a retainer into a Cressmont-like account. He winked at Emily. She smiled, all teeth and certainty. My stomach tightened, but in a different way now, the cold thrill of a plan working. We had the evidence. Not a whisper. Not a suspicion. Documentation, timestamps, third-party witnesses, emails, and payment copies. Everything Mr. Hughes needed to move. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. The plan wasn't revenge theater, it was reconstruction. The goal was to restore what they'd taken and ensure they could never do this to anyone else. When you have people in your life who turn into enemies, the temptation is to ruin them in all the petty ways the heart can imagine. I didn't want petty. I wanted clean, legal, and final. I wanted my name back on the deeds, my clients back under contract, my daughter to see what her choices had cost her, not for spectacle, but so that she might one day understand what she betrayed. We set the date for the first strike, a shareholder meeting Daniel believed was about to close an irresistible deal. We'd present the evidence to the board, the bank, and, if necessary, the press. The trap was laid. All that was left was for him to walk into it. And he would. Because arrogance, when combined with greed, is easier to bait than any animal. They thought I was broken. They thought the best I could muster was a bitter email or a courtless rant. That was their first mistake. Their second was believing that arrogance could replace due diligence. My plan relied on both, arrogance to bait them, diligence to trap them. The Cressmont shell was polished to the point of believability. Mr. Hughes wrote professional-looking proposals and a glossy introductory deck. Marina manufactured plausible email chains and a LinkedIn presence that looked lived in. Ravi set up a bank account for Cressmont Escrow that, on the surface, appeared to belong to a legitimate registrar, except the registrar was a front we controlled. The private investigator fed me footage of Daniel smiling at opportunities like a shark sniffing blood. He would bite. He always did. I kept my public face the part of the broken woman. At neighborhood gatherings, I let people pat my hand sympathetically. When Daniel bragged about the big deal he'd almost closed at the country club, I nodded and smiled like someone grateful for crumbs. Emily, reveling in her new status, walked a little taller, certain she'd never answer to me again. They both needed to feel untouchable. It made their slips more spectacular. The night before the first meeting, I slept little. I reviewed the evidence in my head like a litany. Email headers, transfer timestamps, the PI's video of Daniel signing a retainer and promising fast liquidity, the recorded phone messages where Emily asked how soon she could start spending. Every line threaded back to them. Every signature stung like a brand. And every piece of evidence had a home on an encrypted drive Mr. Hughes now kept in his safe deposit box. The bait was simple and irresistible. Cressmont would partner with my old firm to scale up marketing for a new international client, an annuity-heavy account, supposedly requiring a short-term escrow to cover onboarding fees. To Daniel it read as instantaneous prestige and a reason to route funds through the new escrow. A few clicks, a few signatures, and a paper trail would appear. The escrow account, in reality, led to a controlled account monitored by Ravi and Mr. Hughes. Any transfer there would leave the fingerprints I needed. We rolled it out the way real deals happen. An innocuous introductory email from Cressmont's principal, a follow-up call with a voice actor we'd hired to sound convincing, a mock NDA that Daniel signed electronically, an innocuous invoice for onboarding that his greed couldn't resist. Every click was a trap. Every form he signed would be another nail. The morning of the meeting, Daniel walked into the office radiating triumph. He had a spring in his stride I remembered once, years ago, when he dared to believe in me without ulterior motive. Now that spring was a swagger, and the swagger made him sloppy. He gathered half the board in the conference room. Emily hovered near him like a practice trophy, smartphone at the ready for Instagram, radiant with the sense of someone who believed she'd taken the future into her own hands. I watched from the doorway. I didn't interrupt the meeting. I didn't need to. Mr. Hughes and Ravi had arranged for us to present only after they'd done their little performance. The architecture of legal procedure would be our weapon: cold, precise, boring to anyone who wasn't counting zeros. And boring is death to the arrogant. They want excitement, not paperwork. They trade the latter for the former at their peril. The meeting began with Daniel's polished spiel about new horizons and how Cressmont would bring prestige and liquidity. The board members murmured approval. A few clients' longtime representatives nodded along, distrustful but tempted by the glitter of growth. Daniel had always been good at selling dreams. He had never been as good at protecting the math behind them. When the time came, Mr. Hughes gave his speech like a man reading a verdict. He presented the Cressmont deck, narrative polished, legalese intact, and then, as if by accident, pivoted to the onboarding invoices. At the same time, Ravi projected the account flow visualizations on the screen, wire transfers with timestamps, intermediary accounts, the Cressmont escrow destination. The room that had been humming with excitement quieted to a low, confused hush. Daniel's jaw tightened. He tried to speak, to regain the stage, but Mr. Hughes wasn't done. He walked the board through a few simple, incontrovertible facts. The invoices carried a sequence of memo fields that matched other vendor payments. The Cressmont escrow appeared on the ledger the same night Daniel had pulled a six-figure transfer from my personal account. The IP addresses of the email communications could be cross-referenced back to devices Daniel often used in the house. Each point built on the last until the story was no longer plausible deniability, it was pattern and intent. Emily's face threaded white at the edges. She fumbled for her phone, then slapped it down, realizing perhaps too late that Instagram followers and adoration would not undo a ledger. Daniel, suddenly cornered, tried explanation by bluster. "This is how deals are done," he said, voice a notch louder than before. "You don't all have to question everything." But the board was reading the same spreadsheets as we were. Numbers don't care about volume or volume of excuses. The more Daniel tried to speak over them, the deeper he sank. Mr. Hughes pivoted to the legal consequences, the emergency injunctive remedies, the request for an immediate freeze on suspicious accounts pending forensic audits. That last line was the trap sprung. An injunction could halt transfers long enough for us to secure assets and for Ravi to pull forensic copies of every transaction. Daniel lunged for damage control, phone calls, promises, threats. He moved like a man whose muscles were used to walking away with favors, not arrests. The private investigator, informed to act only if Daniel tried to move funds, reported later that afternoon that Daniel tried to withdraw cash from a corporate credit line and to initiate a third-party transfer. Mr. Hughes had been ready. The bank honored the freeze. Emily, who had once smiled at being in on the secret, now called for legal counsel, her voice tight as if the script she'd practiced had slipped off the page. She texted me something petty and raw. "You always ruin everything," but the words landed hollow. They were a child's tantrum in a courtroom of adults. We watched them flail and strip away bravado. The faces of the men and women on the board tightened into practical resolve. "We need auditors," one said. "We need a forensic accountant." Another added, "If this is true, we must notify clients." The room moved from awe to protection. That flip felt like justice. When I left the office that day, it was with the odd sensation of walking out in sunlight after a long thunderstorm. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile even when I replayed the PI's footage of Daniel signing his name with gusto, or the way Emily's fingers had trembled as she initialed a form no adult should have let a child touch. I felt a different kind of satisfaction, one rooted in the patience of preparation. They had taken everything. They had assumed I was finished. In arrogance, they took the bait. In discipline, we collected the catch. There were more moves to make, press conferences to mitigate, depositions to prepare for, emergency motions to file, but the heart of it was done. They had walked into the trap because they believed their own story, that the world owed them what it took from me. Now the law would do the slow, precise work my anger could not. And in the quiet between the filings and the hearings, I would rebuild the scaffolding of my life. By the rules this time, ruthless and patient. They had called me their enemy. I had no desire to be anything less. They told me courts are where arguments die and documents speak. They were half right. Documents did the speaking, but the sound they made when they hit the table was louder than I imagined. It reverberated through the boardroom, the bank's legal department, the auditor's office, and eventually, the small courthouse where truth goes to be dressed in paperwork. The morning the exposure went public, I woke early as if it were a ritual. I had rehearsed calm so many nights it had become a reflex. Tea, a quiet breath, then the drive to the firm where Mr. Hughes had staged the initial meeting. Staff were already there, Ravi with his laptop, Marina clutching a manila folder, the private investigator with a tired look that said he'd seen people like Daniel before. We moved like a unit that had rehearsed this moment until it was a machine. The first stop was the bank. Mr. Hughes presented the injunction: freeze the suspect accounts, block withdrawals, preserve records. The bank compliance officer read the pages with a face that went from polite to concerned to decisive. "We'll cooperate fully," she said. Her hands were steady. Her pen moved fast. Paperwork can be a weapon if you file faster than your enemy can spend. From the bank we went to the clients. If Daniel and Emily had hoped loyal customers would stand by them, they'd forgotten what loyalty meant in business: trust backed by facts. I sat in rooms with clients who had once trusted a handshake. Their faces were mixtures of confusion and betrayal. We showed them the pattern: contracts that had quietly shifted, payments rerouted through intermediaries, promises signed with names that meant nothing. Some clients wept, others seethed. Several told us they wanted out immediately. Contracts were paused. Revenue stalled. Panic is contagious in commerce. Then came the media. I didn't want theater, but the story needed to be public, controlled, factual, and framed not as melodrama, but as a breach of fiduciary duty. Mr. Hughes arranged a press release, succinct, legally sound, and put directly in the hands of journalists who valued documents more than drama. The headline that afternoon cut sharper than any private spite: major firm faces internal fraud allegations, founder's husband and daughter involved in transfer scheme. People read it like a punch. Neighbors called. Former friends texted. The circle tightened around Daniel like a net. When the board convened an emergency session, Daniel tried charm at first. He smiled and spoke about misunderstandings and temporary glitches. But he couldn't charm documents. Ravi put forensic charts on the screen, timestamps, intermediary accounts, the digital breadcrumb trail that led straight to Daniel's devices. You could see the color drain from people's faces as they watched numbers line up like railroad tracks pointing to a derailment he'd caused. Emily's role hurt most because of its nakedness. She'd signed authorizations before she was of legal majority for major transfers. She'd encouraged clients to move engagements to entities tied to vendors who showed up as shell companies in our mapping. She'd been the eager accomplice in a plot where the architect was the adult who should have protected her from becoming one. That night, during the board's emergency vote, the company moved to suspend any authority Daniel had over client accounts and to initiate an independent forensic audit. The vote was decisive. Men who had once toasted him at country club lunches now read legalese like scripture. The law had a way of halting swagger. A subpoena followed within days. Bank records, vendor contracts, the entire ledger of invoices, every document was summoned and preserved. Mr. Hughes and Ravi worked like librarians of truth, pulling threads and cataloging them methodically. The private investigator delivered footage of Daniel signing documents in a cafe, joking about speeding up the payout. That clip, when played in a closed-door session, made every liar look small. But legal processes are not instant. They are deliberate, patient, sometimes maddeningly slow. In that window, Daniel lashed out. He sent frantic emails, threatening lawsuits, calling people to smear us. Emily, who had once wanted to be the trophy, took to social media in a flurry of defiant posts that read like a child's tantrum rather than a defense. "My mother ruined us, she's unstable," she wrote. "We did what we had to do." Friends of theirs dutifully shared. The world divides quickly into camps when reputations are on the line. The PR battle made me keenly aware of the personal cost. The day after the first article ran, a neighbor who'd once brought over casseroles avoided eye contact. My sister texted, short, cautious. "I'm sorry this is happening. I need space." That phrase, "I need space," was a polite burying of loyalty. People I loved chose distance over truth. It stung, but it also clarified: alliances formed on convenience dissolve when facts get heavy. Courtroom hearings began. Depositions were taken, voices recorded under oath. Daniel's bravado faltered when faced with timestamps and digital logs. Emily's flippant social posts were used against her. They showed intent, a young mind coached to believe the end justified the means. Mr. Hughes was surgical. He didn't shout accusation. He placed facts on the table and let the judge read them. Judges are trained to listen to facts, not family melodrama. In that arena, paperwork is a scalpel. One afternoon, in a deposition room, Emily sat across from a tribunal of lawyers and auditors. She looked small and frightened in a way that made my heart break, not because I pitied her actions, but because I saw the human wreckage a bad alliance can create. She flinched at questions, at first deflecting and then, under pressure, admitting to signing documents she didn't read closely. It was a phrase I'd once used myself in my early days, but never in a context that mimicked deliberate collusion. The admission landed hard. Daniel tried several defenses: plausible deniability, procedural complexity, blaming opportunistic vendors. Each theory required one inconvenient thing: evidence free of gaps. And we had evidence. The board froze accounts, auditors verified transfers, banks reversed certain moves pending litigation. The market reacted, clients pulled back, and the company's stock, if you could call our private valuation a stock of trust, slid. When the judge issued a preliminary ruling to maintain the freezes and order a full forensic audit, I felt a staircase of relief open inside me. It was not victory. It was permission to pursue the next rooms of justice: recovery, restitution, and ensuring they could not rebuild on what they'd stolen. In the following weeks, people started to speak up: former vendors who'd been promised payoffs, clients who regretted following Daniel's pitch, neighbors who admitted they'd seen him move cash late at night. The net tightened. Daniel and Emily's carefully constructed world frayed under the strain of truth. The bravado was gone. In its place, anger, pleadings, threats, whatever a cornered man resorts to when the scale of his misdeeds becomes visible. At night, after long court sessions, Mr. Hughes would hand me yet another packet of carefully labeled exhibits. I read them at my kitchen table under a single lamp and felt something odd: grief for what I had lost, yes, but also a deep, clear certainty that I had done the right thing. Justice, at least in this chapter of my life, required exposure. Truth felt less like vengeance than restoration. There were moments of cruelty too: tabloids printing salacious lines, acquaintances speculating about how a family could implode. Those cut in ways that legal filings couldn't touch. But the thing about a deliberate plan is that while it tolerates collateral damage, it keeps sight of the objective: repair what was broken and make sure those who broke it are held to account. One evening, as the first forensic auditors presented their initial report, the lead investigator looked up and said softly, as if noting the obvious, this was not an accident. His words, simple and forensic, landed like a verdict. They might still fight. They might still try to weasel out. But in rooms where facts mattered most, the scaffolding Daniel and Emily built with arrogance and greed was visible and designed poorly. When I went to bed that night, I did not celebrate. The betrayal still ached. The daughter I had raised had been lost to me in ways I couldn't quickly repair. But the sound of lawyers working, the hum of servers pulling data, the quiet clicking of keys assembling the case, that sound was the cadence of justice being assembled. It was not theatrical. It was necessary. They had exposed themselves. The world had seen their faces against the ledger lines. And for the first time since the whisper in the study, the balance tilted back toward me. The scales were slow, but they were tipping. The final hearings loomed. The recovery phase awaited. But for once, I slept without the urgent buzzing of anxiety. I woke with a plan, and the truth, cold, merciless, and documented, was on my side. There are two kinds of victories in life: the loud ones people cheer for, and the quiet ones that change everything without applause. Mine was the second kind. When the final court ruling came down, it wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no collapse in the courtroom. Just a judge, glasses perched low on his nose, reading out the findings in a steady voice. The accounts Daniel and Emily had drained, frozen and transferred back, the assets they had tried to reroute, returned to my control, the contracts they hijacked, void with penalties, the house they pushed me out of, deeded back in my name. Daniel's fraud was laid bare, and Emily's complicity was impossible to deny. The gavel struck, and in that single sound, months of agony crystallized into justice. Daniel was livid. He paced the courtroom like a caged animal, spewing threats about appeals, about how I'd regret humiliating him. But his voice carried no weight anymore. He wasn't a partner, wasn't even a man with authority. He was just another defendant with a ruined name. Emily, though. She sat small in her chair, shoulders hunched, her eyes fixed on the floor. For the first time, I saw not the smug girl who rolled her eyes at me, but the child who had been seduced by her father's arrogance, who thought power meant turning on her own mother. When the judge addressed her directly, "You are not a child in this matter. You acted knowingly." Her face crumpled. It should have brought me joy. It didn't. It broke something deeper inside me. Because revenge, when it comes at the cost of blood, is never sweet. It's bitter. Necessary, but bitter. In the days that followed, my life shifted back piece by piece. The house was mine again, though it felt different when I first stepped inside, quiet, haunted by betrayal. I opened drawers and found remnants of their scheme, and signed forms, scribbled notes, Emily's handwriting on documents she should never have touched. I burned them in the fireplace. The business was bruised but not broken. Clients returned once they saw stability, once Ravi's audit cleaned the stains. Marina rejoined me full-time, her loyalty fiercer than ever. Together, we rebuilt. I was no longer the woman who had once believed family was unshakable. I was harder, colder, wiser. Daniel disappeared into lawsuits and disgrace. Friends who once toasted him at the club stopped returning his calls. His swagger turned into a shuffle. He became a cautionary tale whispered at business dinners, the man who thought he could outsmart his own wife and ended up with nothing. Emily, though. She tried, once, to reach me. She showed up at my door weeks after the ruling, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry." The words I had waited months and years to hear. And yet, when they came, they didn't fix anything. "Sorry," I asked coldly. "You signed your name to my destruction. You laughed while you gutted me. And now you're sorry." Tears welled in her eyes. "Dad said it was the only way." I thought. I cut her off. "You thought betraying your mother was a game. You thought money was more important than blood." She flinched as if slapped. "Go home, Emily," I said finally, my voice flat. "This house isn't yours anymore." She left without another word. I closed the door and didn't look back. People ask if I regret being so cold. If, as a mother, I should have opened my arms and forgiven her. But the truth is this: betrayal by blood cuts the deepest. And forgiveness isn't a gift you give to someone who would use it as another weapon. Emily chose her side. She chose Daniel. And choices have consequences. Perhaps one day she'll learn. Perhaps not. Either way, she'll never again have the power to destroy me. Late at night, when I sit in the garden with a glass of wine, I think about everything I've lost and everything I've regained. My fortune.my business.my name. But more than that, I think about what I've gained. Clarity, strength, the unshakable truth that no matter who turns against me, husband, daughter, the world itself, I will not be erased. That is the real revenge. Not the money. Not the house. Not even the court victory. The real revenge is that I am still here. Standing. Thriving. Breathing. And they're not. So if you're listening, if you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, remember this: survival is the sweetest vengeance. And thriving, rebuilding, and living without them? That is victory. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's silent. It's cold. It's final. If this story of betrayal and ultimate justice gripped you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment with your thoughts. Because trust me, the world is full of stories like mine. And some endings are even colder.